Hey YouTube, good morning. It's Chuck. Welcome back. Today we have a little bit more spring work to do because my bees are booming so strong. We've got to make sure we avoid the swarming impulse that they're going to get here on these warm days. They've got lots of brood. Most of my hives have well over 10 frames of brood split across 2 chambers. So the top is building out quickly too, but I got to make sure that the brood nest does not get congested. Expanding the brood nest is what we need to be doing right now, or equalizing also, and I'll talk about that in a little bit also. So I am going to be in the apiary a little later on today, so towards the end of this video we're going to have some live apiary content. But in order to make that understandable, I wanted to give a little lesson that I have come to learn over the years and has been reinforced by Greg Rogers. I think put a video out on it. It's a technique about expanding the brood nest and some golden rules that you need to remember when doing it. And that's the important thing I want you to leave this video with today, is the 2 golden rules about expanding the brood nest. Never leave a brood frame alone, meaning by itself, and never separate the brood nest with more than 1 frame. So don't put 2 empty frames in between the brood nest. Those are the 2 golden rules I'm going to highlight today. But in order to illustrate this lesson, I wanted you to be able to see and conceptualize the actual brood nest as the bees live in a deep chamber. I've got 2 mediums here today for illustrative purposes because I didn't have a spare deep. But on the front here, I've got the brood nest illustrated by these long brown pieces of tape, and in the center you see we've got full frames of brood. Let's just say the full length tape equals a full frame of brood, and towards the edge you've got smaller amounts of brood, so the ball of bees inside the nest can be visualized like this. When we crack open our hives and look at the top, especially if it's 2 deeps, we're essentially looking at the slice of the brood nest. That's why you got to look up and down and conceptualize this ball of bees that is their brood nest. And these frames are in between that ball, but that's how they keep the hive temperature consistent and warm inside of the nest. And I'm using this orange today to represent honey and pollen frames. So you see you have food frames on the end and then a ball of bees coming into the inside. So that's kind of the perspective from the front when you walk up to a hive, that when you crack it open you should visualize the nest. So when we count our frames of bees, while one of them may be a half frame, that's this smaller on the edge compared to the center ones here. Okay, so that's the front side view. And on the top side view, I just kind of want to show you, I've got this kind of represented in a similar fashion. On the edges I've got honey. And in here on the edge of your brood nest, you'll probably notice you have pollen. If you start your inspection on the outside in, as soon as you start to see the pollen frames, your next frame is most likely going to be brood. That's why I've got pollen here represented on these frames here. And in this hive demonstration here, I'm saying I've got 6 frames of brood with some smaller on the edges with food and pollen on the edges. So in the apiary, this one's booming, a lot of good food, and the bees are growing. I need to give room for the bees to continue to raise young without getting the overcrowded impulse of the brood nest being constrained and giving the swarm impulse because they don't have any more room for the queen to lay. So if you're going to expand this brood nest, this is where you apply those golden rules. And let me just go ahead and set this to the side to show you. So now I'm just going to use this as a demonstration of a deep here. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I've also got 3 frames here that I'm calling empty foundation or empty drawn comb. You perhaps could have a little bit of food or something in it, but let's just say there's a lot of open cells or foundation that they need to get to work and drawing this out. So I've got 3 sample frames for the purposes of this. So when you open up the brood nest, you're probably going to take a couple of these out so you have a little bit of room to work. And then we're going to apply the 3 rules here. If I've gone ahead and inspected and I realize I've got these 6 frames of brood, in order to expand the brood nest, remember the rule is never leave a frame of brood by itself. So this would be a no-no, because this little frame of brood is on the other side and not enough bees can keep this warm. So you should not leave any brood frames alone if you can. So that was a no-no. So to follow the golden rules, I could go ahead and take 2 frames there, 2 frames there, and go ahead and expand that. Well, yeah, I didn't take 2 frames out, that's why. So this would be an appropriate expansion of the brood nest if this was enough food on the edges. Go ahead, 2, 2, and 2 with some empty in the middle. So that would be one way of doing it. Now, another way of doing it would be to leave 3 together and just expand it once. That would probably be what I'm doing this time of year. I don't want to give them too much space because they're not necessarily a full mature hive. It's not quite swarm season yet, but it's definitely going to keep 2 clusters separate here and give them some work to do in the strongest and most populous part of the hive. Now, you might say, well, let's really get them going together and put 2 frames of foundation in there. This breaks one of the golden rules of never leave 2 frames empty to separate the brood nest. This can create the sensation that this is 2 separate brood nests and this one could theoretically go queenless, and in some scenarios they could even make queen cells over here. That's probably not going to happen in most cases, but just recognize this distance, this gap, breaks that ball of bees up so the cluster function no longer works as well. So 2 frames of empty is a no-no. So in this scenario, I think this would probably be where I left it. You could possibly come back to this scenario, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and that would be a perfectly acceptable expansion. If you need to keep enough food in the nest, I think that I probably would do it like this. Keep the pollen together, put the frame in the middle, stack this in there, and maybe look at the second deep. In the second deep, you might come up here and put 1 more frame. Now, you got to recognize you could put this frame right on top of this frame, and that would be okay, but you can also offset it a little bit so the bees cluster doesn't have one big gap where there's no warmth in there. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you today, is how to expand the brood nest to give some room, give them something to do before we can split. And then you might say, well, what if I don't have any room to expand anymore? What if I'm already out at 9 or 10 frames in here and there's no more room? I can't take all the food away. That's a good question. So this is where expansion won't work anymore because you don't have any more room. And because it's not grafting season, we don't have any queens available yet, you can't do splits. So now you need to equalize. Equalize means play Robin Hood. Take from the rich and give to the poor. We all got some weaker hives, or ones that haven't quite ramped up as fast, maybe fewer Italian genetics, and they're just not quite rearing up quite as soon. That's where you take these really, really strong brood frames that have all of that brood on it, and you perhaps give it to another hive. And then you can take this brood nest back down. And let's just say we did just like that, and we could even put a empty frame out here. So we shrunk the brood nest, we've equalized it, we've given them some empty frames to work on. We didn't violate the 2 frames of brood rule, staying together and never putting more than 1 empty frame by itself. So you might have been tempted to do this again, right? Well, that breaks the rule. You can't put 2 empty together. So this one needs to go on the edge somewhere so they can start drawing that out, but this brood nest is kept nice and tight. All right, well, hopefully this visualized my demonstration for you. So let's go into the apiary a little bit later when it warms up today, and I'll hang you around my neck and maybe we'll do some equalization and I'll show you what it looks like with the bees. All right, YouTube, we're out in the apiary. Let's do some equalizing and some expansion of the brood nest here in the apiary. I've already done 4 hives yesterday, and I've got about another 5 here and a few more in the long Langstroths. But for the demonstration of what I wanted to show you, I think these are going to be some good hives, mostly because they're of different strengths. This one right here is booming. These 2 right here and the 2 over there are doing great, but have probably a little bit more room in them. More than likely, I can probably do some equalization off of that big one to either one of these smaller ones. But without opening all the hives at once, you've got to sort of kind of go back and forth a little bit because you don't want to leave the hives open too long for any sort of robbing to start. There's a little bit of a maple nectar flow on right now and a lot of pollen coming in from the red maples. So the silver maples are done here. It's about 52 degrees, 53 degrees at the moment, so it's really warming up. I think it'll be a good chance to get you in the hives. All right, let's get going. All right, so there's the first look at the top of the cluster from what we talked about earlier. Remember, this is just a feeder. Set it to the side. All right, so you can definitely see the top of that ball of bees is up here. And with this feeder in here, I've got room for 8. So let's just take a look and see how she's doing. Take off the end frame first. Food frame. Double honey. Drone comb. So she's starting to put drones out here on the edge. brood. So this is the top box, not even the bottom box. So while I'm doing this, I'm inspecting for brood patterns, looking for the queen, and that is, I'm gonna count that as one frame of brood already. So if I was gonna equalize, and this is a frame of brood, and it is, I can keep these two together and add an empty frame in between. The edge frames can also be used as empty frames as long as there's not too much food in there. You can see she's drawn this out. This is much lighter. This has got eggs in it, and there's the queen. So the queen's in the top of the box laying. Give you a peek at her. She's running from the light. And while I manipulate this hive, I'm just going to go ahead and catch her here. So she's up in the, and she's nice and protected. So I can move much quicker now. Probably speed this up for you guys. Okay, what I'm gonna do here is out of the center of this brood nest, this full-on brood frame, this thing is just packed with brood. You saw those drones earlier in the drone cone frame. I'm gonna go ahead and put this one in the top box and separate that brood nest on the bottom. Just give them a little bit of room with another frame from the edge of this top box. Wow, there's not much left. So this has got some open cells with a little bit of nectar in it. I'm gonna put this one in the center, let them clean this out, and start laying in this one. This is gonna give them something to work on. All right, this hive is booming. It's gonna need to be split right out of the gate. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. First peak, top of the cluster, much smaller. Notice the difference? A lot less bees on the top of this ball. So probably got more room for taking some of this and moving it over here, more than likely. This is gonna be a good equalization candidate. Empty frame, starting to draw some burr comb, just not enough bees to get that working. So these three empty frames need to come out. Let's take a look at this food frame. And we got brood up in the top, but just one small frame of brood. Drawing this out, see how they're starting to do some of this burr comb? This is what they do when there's just not enough bees to draw it out nicely. Much smaller colony. And then this should be a food frame. Yep. Okay. We're not even gonna crack the bottom, but I'm just gonna take a look. Smallish cluster, not a lot of bees over here. Probably could do a little bit equalizing down there too. Let's double check. Make sure we don't have a sick or weak hive. That's new wax, so they're drawing that out. Pollen frame. Lots of pollen. Okay, so we're doing good here. We just have a smallish cluster, but we're gonna boost this hive up. Not necessarily that it needs boosting so much, but in order to give these stronger hives a little bit of breathing room, we're gonna find the queen so we can move a little quicker. Uh-oh, see that? That is not a swarm cell. That is a full-on queen cell on the 3rd of February, first of the year. It does not look like a swarm cell. That could be a super seizure cell. So we need to find the queen. And just before we crush that or anything, Not that she's going to be able to mate this early, but it's a shot in the dark. I'm going to set this aside because it's got a queen cell on it. See this down here too? Let's see what we got. There's jelly in that. Second queen cell. That one was on the bottom. And there's our queen. This is my POL2 queen. This is not my natural genetics. Interesting to find some supersedure or swarm cells already in the smallest hive we have. So I've got her isolated. We're gonna boost this one up. And because I've got the queen, I can take both of those queen cells out. This hive is not strong enough, in my opinion, to swarm. I think that was probably supersedure, but nice open frame. Lots of room to expand in this one. This hive arguably could still be just a single. And food and pollen on the edges. Starts of another queen cell there too. Okay, I need some more brood in this hive. We'll see if they continue to have the swarm impulse. That's interesting. But it's coming out of this hive. This one is almost too big. This is the top of a honey super that I've got on here just to give them some work to do, drawing out wax. And they are all the way up in this honey super, just drawing wax for me. Another one of my videos. Top of the second cluster here. So look at that, the top of the second cluster. So remember that ball of bees I was talking about? So that's the top of the second cluster, just booming. Almost too much. See, I even got a room for an extra frame up here. I'd like to find my queen before. Look at that pretty drawn wax. This is what bees that have numbers can do. A little bit of nectar flow, a little bit of one-to-one syrup on there. Food frames, pollen frames. Cluster is going to be next. Holy drones. Man, oh man, is she laying up some drones. And they're hatching already, so my drones are going to be just fine here for my grafting in a few weeks. I think this was an empty foundation frame a couple of weeks ago. Yep. And they're busy on it, see that? This is good. This is the congestion relief that I need in here. Lots of adult drones that have already hatched that are just milling around, growing up, getting ready. More drones. There's the queen. Okay, so this is going to get a lot quicker. So she is doing a bang up job. But now I've got her isolated. I'm going to put her somewhere safe. You guys know me and keeping my queen safe. All right, so now I can take some brood out of this hive and give it to the weaker hive. I'm just going to start with this one because it's here. I'm going to crack the bottom open also. We're equalizing and relieving congestion. quickly while we have both hives open. We've got just a lot of bees here. A lot of disruption going on, which is not always good with 2 hives open. So they got food in the drone comb frame, so I probably should let them, well, typically with a frame like this, I like them to eat that out so they can lay drones in the drone comb, but she did something different this year. Larva, fresh drawn comb. This is a good one to relieve congestion. So I'm gonna put this one in the center of her brood nest, up top on this one probably. All right, brood, no risk of the queen. All right, so we've added 2 frames of brood to the bottom of this one. And I'm gonna put this frame of food and brood on the edge here. All right, queen's going down to the bottom. And this queen is suspect because she's starting to have her workers lay some queen cells. All right, this queen cell's coming out because I know I have a queen. Save that for some royal jelly. Three frames of brood in there. Give them some foundation to work on. 2 frames of brood, foundation, 3 frames of brood. Let them work on this one on the edge. Sorry about that. Camera got a little hot. All right, putting it back together. I've already put the queen back in here. Strength, drones, food, working frame, drones, food frame. I'm gonna go ahead and give this food frame to this hive. All right, so these are empty foundation frames on the outside of this brood nest to give them more work to do. Took a lot of congestion out of here, added it to that hive. This hive has got plenty to do. I'm not gonna add too much space to it because it's gotta grow up a little bit. But I added 3 frames of brood, so it's plenty strong there. Queen's already back in that hive. And this one's back together, the queen's in that hive, giving them some more work to do. They've got a lot of work to do now because I added a lot of foundation in that outer edge of that brood nest. Okay, equalized from the strong to the weak, centered the brood nest, found both queens. Mystery, a couple queen cells in this one. Knocked this one back a little bit with equalization. This one needed splitting. I didn't split it. I added it to a weaker hive. That's what I mean about equalization with the expansion of the brood nest. Take a few notes. And we'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, everybody.